Three keys to a Texans victory. I do think there's one huge thing that people are ignoring about this Browns defense. I'll get to that in a little bit. First key is an obvious one, and it's simply this. Don't let Amari Cooper have 265 yards receiving. How about that? How about not setting any records? Avoiding the huge play, limiting the big play. That means two things. One, being mentally sharp on the back end. That includes linebackers, not just the secondary, but two, not biting on play action in general. That includes the defensive ends. So you think about the two big headline grabbing plays in that game, amongst many. But the first one, the first play from scrimmage, when Amari Cooper went deep, caught the ball down near the goal line. Texans bid on play action. The safety lost leverage, and Amari Cooper gets right down to the goal line. The second one, the Amari Cooper 75-yard touchdown down the left sideline. So got a couple things going on there. For one, D'Angelo Ross, the defensive back that was in coverage on Amari Cooper, was not supposed to be left alone right there, but the safety jumped the crossing route by David Njoku. The defensive line bit on play action. So the defensive end gets sucked down to defend the run. You leave Joe Flacco, who's deceptively mobile, not deceptively fast. He's still not fast, but he's mobile, and he can throw on the move. Very adept at the bootleg. Thanks a lot, Gary Kubiak, teaching him back there in Baltimore. But you cannot do that. You cannot bite on play action versus this team, because that's what Joe Flacco has been lethal with since he got to the Browns. He got all kinds of other issues that go hand in hand with these second couple of keys. But you just simply have to be sharper mentally and avoid these big plays. So Flacco had 6 passes of 20 plus yards in that game. And you think, well, that sounds like a lot. Yeah. CJ Stroud had the second most explosive pass plays, 20 plus yards, and he averaged 4 per game. So 6 is a really, really big deal. One thing you would hope is that Steven Nelson stays healthy the entire game. I think a lot of you who watch this channel know that I'm not a huge demander of Derek Stingley following Amari Cooper around for a couple of reasons. One of which is that Amari Cooper can line up in the slot, not just over on the other side, on the right side. And Stingley just hasn't spent a whole bunch of time this year in the slot. So right now in the playoffs, I don't think is the time to employ that. Next year, hopefully with a healthy Stingley, you can start getting him more work all over the place. Maybe he's a guy that tracks the number one receiver. I just don't think this is the year, and this is not the time to start doing it. Key number 2 of 3 is simply this. John Grenard and Will Anderson, both of whom have missed time these last few games. John Grenard's been completely out. Will Anderson has had limited action. They need to come up big. And I think it's awesome that they're playing through injury. I think they're tough as hell, but you just flat out need them to come up big and not just get pressure on Flacco. Either A, get him on the ground for sacks, or B, ideally force turnovers. And I'm putting a lot of pressure on those guys. Look, Derek Barnett's been awesome. Khalil Davis has shown up. Malik Collins and Sheldon Rankins, both playing through injuries themselves, have been very, very good as well. But those guys on the edge, the reason they're so important against the Browns is that the offensive tackles for the Browns are one of the few weak spots on that entire roster. It is a very well-constructed roster, but they are down to their 4th and 5th options at offensive tackle. They lost their top 3 offensive tackles. That's the area of opportunity. And getting back to Joe Flacco's mobility and all of that, one thing the Texans did a bad job of was containing Joe Flacco. And I think people think I'm joking when I say, no, we've seen this. He can move. He can maneuver. He wasn't on the couch. He was out there doing agility drill. I'm so tired of hearing people say that they signed him off the couch. He was obviously working out. He's more athletic now and more spry now than he was when he was 25. So containing him with that disciplined pass rush, the Texans had actually done a really good job of developing over the course of the first half of the season. They started rushing with more discipline. One guy would flush the quarterback from the right, and the guy on the left would get the sack. It was a true, complete team effort. The other big part of that is you need to do it with 4 guys instead of blitzing, because you need all the help you can on the back end to limit those big plays. Again, focus on A, getting Joe Flacco down on the ground or forcing turnovers, and B, stopping the run with a 7-man front so you can help out on the back end, avoid those big plays. And then that turnover part. Key number 3. Look, I hate doing it because every single game in the NFL, you can use turnovers as a key to victory, but there's an extreme difference in these two teams. On the one hand, you have Joe Flacco, notorious for turning the ball over, and it's no different this year. In 5 games, he's thrown 8 interceptions. He's had 4 fumbles. He's only lost 1 of them, but he's been loosey-goosey with the football. The 2 interceptions he threw in the Texans game weren't actually that bad. They were like relatively no harm interceptions, but he coughs the ball up. So how do you do that? You create that pressure we're talking about. But the reason why it's so important on the Browns side is that this Browns defense is awesome, like very, very good. And this is the thing I think that people have under discussed and haven't quite acknowledged. The Browns defense is awesome. I'm not making like any qualifiers there or anything at all. The Browns team, mind you, and I'm saying team, not defense. The Browns team has allowed a lot of points this year relative to how good their defense is. The Browns team are only 12th in points allowed. So the Ravens are number 1 in points allowed. They've allowed the fewest points in the NFL. So why is that? How can the Browns defense be so good? Well, because the offense turns the ball over so much, and they've continually put that Browns defense in poor field position or allowed points themselves, or special teams has done it at times. So that defense can only overcome so much. So if the Texans win this game, I think it's going to be a relatively low scoring affair. And some of those points are going to have to come off of Joe Flacco turnovers, or at the very least Browns turnovers, because that's the weak spot. The weak spot in this Browns defense is the offense's proclivity for turnovers. And you might think, well, okay, well, how much control do they have over that? They have the control over that with A, not making mental errors on the back end, and B, getting a pass rush, forcing bad passes, or forcing Joe Flacco to throw into tight windows, which makes everybody nervous. Browns fans will acknowledge that. They get nervous about the tight window throws by Joe Flacco. And then B, and this is the other side of the turnover equation, CJ Stroud continuing to do what he's been doing, which is show a maturity behind his years, not pressing it, understanding that sometimes you got to win low scoring games and you bide your time until the time is right, and hopefully get a short field a time or 2 or 7, whatever. I'll be greedy about this. Get a lopsided field a bunch of times. I do trust that he'll do that. I'm not afraid I'm jinxing him right now or anything, but I think it's going to be a hell of a game. I think if the Texans win this one, it's going to be a relatively low scoring affair, and it's going to involve not necessarily a quarterback who plays with jaw-dropping statistics, but a quarterback who plays a more calm, cool, and collected game than the Browns quarterback. Everybody have an awesome one. Browns fans who are here via the algorithm, I don't care. I tend to have very good conversations with you people. I do the pregame show down in the southeast end zone there outside the stadium. So when you're on your way in, say hello if you like, as you try to absorb as much vitamin D as possible before you head back up to your icy homes. And everybody have a great one.
Does Pierce have enough gas? He does!